Millionaire wheelchair user expels mechanic from the ranch, but regrets it and begs for forgiveness. Anger erupted in Victoria Harrington's chest like a volcano. Her blue eyes flashed when she caught Rachel Turner, the mechanic hired just 3 months ago, leaning over her private office desk at the ranch. The young woman's hands were flipping through documents that definitely weren't part of her agricultural equipment maintenance duties. The sound of the wheelchair cutting through the morning silence of the office made Rachel startle and drop some papers onto the waxed wooden floor. Her red hair, usually tied in a practical ponytail, was slightly disheveled, and her cheeks flushed instantly when she realized she'd been discovered. "Get away from my desk immediately," Victoria shouted, her voice echoing off the office's noble wood-paneled walls. The 52-year-old businesswoman, always impeccable in her red blazers even while supervising rural work, felt her blood boiling in her veins. The distrust she'd developed over recent years after so many professional and personal disappointments was now being confirmed once again. Rachel raised her hands defensively, her brown eyes glistening with nervous tears. "Mrs. Victoria, I can explain. I was just looking for the 1978 tractor manual you asked me to review yesterday. The cabinet where the manuals are usually kept was locked, so I thought it might be here on the desk." "Liar," Victoria roared, moving her chair even closer to the solid mahogany desk dominating the center of the room. "These are confidential company financial documents, supply contracts, cost spreadsheets, correspondence with investors. What would a mechanic be doing looking for this information if not to sell it to the competition?" The words came out like whips, each syllable loaded with years of accumulated paranoia. Victoria had built her agricultural empire with much sweat and sacrifice, starting as the daughter of small rural producers in rural Texas and becoming one of the region's biggest agribusiness entrepreneurs. Her Meadowbrook Ranch, with its 800 acres of fertile land, was the result of decades of hard work and sound decisions. "Mrs. Victoria, please let me explain properly," Rachel pleaded, trying to organize the papers she'd dropped. "I would never do something like that. My work here means everything to me. I grew up hearing stories about this ranch. My dad always spoke fondly of this place." "Enough with the lies," Victoria interrupted, slapping her right palm against the arm of her wheelchair. "I know your type. You pretend to be honest, gain our trust, and then stab us in the back. How many others have tried to do the same to me? How many people I trusted betrayed me when I was most vulnerable?" The businesswoman instantly remembered Richard Blackwell, her former business partner, who had tried to take full control of the company right after the accident that left her dependent on a wheelchair. There had been months of legal battles, bitter tears, and sleepless nights before she managed to keep her assets intact. The experience had left deep scars on her ability to trust others. Rachel realized any attempt at explanation would be useless at that moment. The fury in Victoria's eyes was too intense, the distrust too deeply rooted to be dissolved with simple words. The 27-year-old mechanic, who had found her dream job at Meadowbrook Ranch, felt her world slowly collapsing. "You're fired," Victoria declared with cutting coldness. "I want you to gather your tools and leave my property within 1 hour. And if I find out you took any information from here, you can be sure I'll take the appropriate measures." "But Mrs. Victoria," Rachel tried again, her voice choked with emotion. "1 hour, Rachel, not a minute more. I'll ask Samuel to escort you to the main gate." Samuel Crawford, the ranch foreman for over 15 years, appeared at the office door as if summoned telepathically. His face, weathered by the sun, and years of outdoor work showed discomfort with the situation, but he knew well his employer's temperament when suspicion took hold of her. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The silence that followed Rachel's departure from the office was unsettling. Victoria remained alone among the dark wood furniture and the paintings depicting the ranch's history, from its founding by her grandparents in the 1950s. The black and white photographs showed generations of dedicated workers, old tractors, and abundant harvests that had brought prosperity to the Harrington family. She tried to focus on the financial reports spread across the desk, but her mind kept returning to the episode that had just occurred. There was something in Rachel's gaze, a genuine sincerity that contrasted with the situation she was found in. But Victoria had learned the hard way that appearances could be deceiving, especially when it came to protecting her assets and her company. The businesswoman spent the rest of the morning reviewing contracts and planning for the next soybean harvest, trying to push away the confused thoughts that insisted on troubling her. Her fingers automatically slid across the pages of the documents, but her concentration was fragmented between numbers and a strange feeling that perhaps she had acted hastily. 3 days passed in relative tranquility. The ranch's routine continued its normal flow, with Samuel coordinating the field teams, the employees tending to the dairy cattle and the corn crop that was in its final growth stage. Victoria maintained her usual schedule of virtual meetings with suppliers, consultations with agronomists, and market analyses that determined Meadowbrook's business strategies. It was on a sunny Thursday, when the September sky promised a generous spring for the region, that the first signs of trouble began to appear. The 1985 model tractor, a robust machine that had always worked without major complications, developed hydraulic system failures early in the morning. Samuel managed to improvise a temporary repair, but warned Victoria that a more detailed inspection would be necessary. On Friday morning, 2 additional tractors developed problems simultaneously. The transmission system of the 1992 model began making strange noises and losing power, while the newest tractor in the fleet, a 2015 model, developed electrical failures that left several auxiliary systems inoperable. The coincidence was disturbing, but Victoria preferred to attribute it to the intensive use of the equipment during recent months. The weekend brought an alarming escalation in the situation. 3 more machines developed various defects: engine problems, oil system leaks, brake failures, and irregularities in the fuel system. It was as if the entire fleet was disintegrating simultaneously, turning the prosperous ranch into a graveyard of broken equipment. Samuel sought out Victoria on Sunday afternoon, his worried expression reflecting the gravity of the situation. They met on the terrace of the main house, an imposing colonial-style building that dominated the rural landscape, with a privileged view of the cultivated fields and pastures where cattle spread out in white and black patches. "Mrs. Victoria, we need to talk about the tractors," said the foreman, taking off his straw hat and running his hand through his graying hair. "The situation is getting serious. There are already 7 machines with problems, and I don't have enough technical knowledge to fix such complex issues." The businesswoman adjusted her shawl over her shoulders as she watched the movement of employees trying to keep the farm's basic activities running, with the few equipment still operational. The gentle evening breeze carried the sweet scent of vegetation and the distant sound of cattle lowing, creating a peaceful contrast with the storm of worries forming in her mind. "What do you think is causing this, Samuel? Could it be sabotage by some competitor? Or maybe the equipment is reaching the end of its useful life?" The foreman hesitated before answering, carefully choosing his words. "Mrs. Victoria, I need to say something you might not want to hear. Rachel had warned me about some of these problems before she was fired. She said she had noticed signs of wear during preventive maintenance, but wanted to do a more detailed analysis before presenting a report." Rachel's name echoed in Victoria's mind like an alarm bell. The businesswoman felt a tightness in her stomach as she processed the information. Had she misinterpreted the situation in the office? Was the young mechanic actually looking for technical documentation and not confidential business information? "And why didn't you tell me this before, Samuel?" "Because you were very angry, Mrs. Victoria. I thought you wouldn't want to hear anything related to Rachel for a long time. But now, seeing all these problems happening exactly as she predicted, I need to be honest." The foreman's words hit Victoria like punches to the stomach. She had built her business reputation based on her ability to make quick and accurate decisions, but now she found herself confronted with the possibility of having made a serious mistake driven by paranoia and excessive distrust. "What is your recommendation to solve the current situation?" she asked, trying to maintain a professional tone despite the emotional turmoil she felt. Samuel put his hat back on his head and looked at the fields stretching to the horizon. "Mrs. Victoria, I think we should hire a specialized company from the city. It will be expensive, but it's the only option I see at the moment. The harvest season is approaching, and if we don't have the equipment working, we'll lose the entire crop." The prospect of hiring high-cost external services at a time when the farm needed to maximize profits for future investments was worrying. Victoria had carefully planned the annual budget, and unexpected expenses of this magnitude could compromise other important projects, such as expanding the cattle facilities and modernizing the irrigation systems. Make the necessary contacts, Samuel. I need to know how much it will cost and what the timeline is to get everything working again. Yes, Mrs. Victoria. I'll call the Industrial Mechanics Corporation in the capital first thing tomorrow morning. They have a good reputation and equipment for transporting the larger machines. That night, Victoria had trouble sleeping. Lying in her king-size bed in the main bedroom of the house, she stared at the dark ceiling, while her mind processed the events of the past few days. The linen curtains allowed the soft moonlight to partially illuminate the room, decorated with antique furniture, inherited from her family. The businesswoman remembered the expression on Rachel's face when she was accused of espionage. There was genuine surprise, deep hurt, and a kind of disappointment that went beyond simply fearing job loss. It was as if something far more important had been shattered in that moment, something related to expectations and dreams that Victoria hadn't understood at the time. She tried to mentally reconstruct the exact sequence of events from that fateful morning. Rachel was leaning over the desk, that was undeniable. But what if she really was looking for technical documentation? What if the explanation she offered was true? What if Victoria had destroyed the professional life of an innocent person based solely on paranoia? The weight of business responsibility had always been a constant companion in Victoria's life. But now she felt an additional dimension of that responsibility, the awareness that her decisions profoundly affected other people's lives. Rachel wasn't just a disposable employee, she was a talented young professional who had placed her hopes and dreams in her work at Meadowbrook Ranch. The following Monday, Samuel returned with news that made Victoria's heart race. The company from the capital had sent a technician to evaluate the equipment, and the diagnosis was devastating. The defects were more serious than they had imagined. The repair costs reached $280,000, and the estimated timeline was 45 business days. 45 days, Victoria murmured, feeling the world spin around her wheelchair. The harvest needs to begin in 3 weeks, or we lose the entire soybean crop. That represents nearly $2 million in direct losses, not counting the financial commitments we won't be able to honor. The technician said some equipment are very old models, Mrs. Victoria, Samuel explained with regret. They'll need to order special parts, some even from other countries. It's a complex process that can't be rushed. The businesswoman felt as if she were being sucked into a financial black hole. Her entire life had been built on careful planning, risk management, and calculated decisions. Now she found herself facing a situation that could destroy decades of hard work, due to a sequence of broken equipment and her own inability to maintain the mechanics that could have prevented the disaster. And there's no alternative? No company that specifically works with old equipment? Samuel hesitated again, and Victoria realized the foreman was struggling with some thought he didn't know how to express. The morning light streamed through the office's wide windows, illuminating the shelves filled with books on farm management and sustainable agriculture she had collected over the years. Mrs. Victoria, I need to say something that might hurt you even more. Rachel was specialized exactly in this type of old equipment. Her father worked here at the ranch many years ago when you were younger. He taught her all the secrets of the vintage tractors, these machines that today are almost impossible to find parts for. The revelation hit Victoria like a bolt from the blue. Samuel kept talking, but his voice seemed to come from very far away as the businesswoman tried to process the information. Rachel's father had worked at Meadowbrook Ranch. That would explain the instinctive knowledge the young woman demonstrated about the property's specific equipment. What's her father's name? Victoria asked with a hoarse voice. Joseph Turner. He worked here for almost 20 years, from your parents' time until a few years after you took over the management. He was considered the best mechanic in the region, knew every bolt of those old tractors. Unfortunately, he passed away about 10 years ago, but he passed all his knowledge to his daughter, Joseph Turner. The name stirred dormant memories in Victoria's mind. She vaguely remembered a tall man, always smiling, who treated the machines with the care of someone looking after pets. Her parents always spoke well of him, praising his dedication and honesty. Joseph was one of those people who arrived early and left only after personally checking that everything was in order. And Rachel never mentioned this family connection, Victoria said more to herself than to Samuel. I think she wanted to prove her own worth before revealing the connection, Mrs. Victoria. Some people prefer to earn their place on their own merit, without relying on their parents' reputation. The foreman's observation touched a sensitive point in Victoria's personal history. She herself had faced similar challenges when she took over the ranch's management after her parents' retirement. Many doubted her ability to run such a complex business, especially after the accident that left her dependent on a wheelchair. Perhaps Rachel was going through a similar journey, trying to build her own professional identity. The weight of guilt began to form in Victoria's chest, like a stone growing with every breath. Not only had she unfairly dismissed a talented employee, but she had also destroyed an opportunity to reconnect with the ranch's history. Joseph Turner represented a golden era of the property when the equipment worked perfectly under his specialized care. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The following Tuesday, another bombshell exploded over the ranch's recovery plans. Industrial Mechanics Corporation called to inform that they could not meet the initially established deadline. Problems with international suppliers of specialized parts and the technical complexity of the old equipment made the project unfeasible within the schedule needed for the harvest. Victoria received the call in her office, surrounded by stacks of financial documents and contracts that now seemed like worthless paper in the face of the developing crisis. The company representative's voice sounded professional but definitive. It was impossible to guarantee the equipment would be working in time to save the crop. There must be some alternative, Victoria insisted, feeling desperation growing in her throat. You're a specialized company. You must know other suppliers, other options. Ms. Harrington, we understand the urgency of the situation, but equipment of this specific age requires very specialized knowledge. There are few professionals in the country who fully master these old models. Most modern workshops simply don't have experience with such specific technology. The words echoed in the quiet office like a death sentence. Victoria hung up the phone and stared out the window at the fields that could become a financial desert if the harvest was lost. The year's investments, the bank loans, the employees' salaries, everything depended on the revenue that would come from selling the crop. Samuel appeared at the office door a few minutes later, as if he had sensed the desperate energy emanating from the room. His face showed the concern of someone who knew the agricultural cycles well and fully understood the consequences of a lost harvest. Mrs. Victoria, I heard about the company's call. What are we going to do now? The businesswoman turned her chair to face her trusted foreman, trying to maintain the professional composure that had always characterized her in times of crisis. But beneath the controlled appearance, a storm of emotions threatened to erupt: anger at herself, fear about the financial future, and a growing regret that gnawed at her peace. Samuel, I need to ask a direct question, and I want an honest answer. In your opinion, based on everything you've seen and know, could Rachel solve our problems? The foreman didn't hesitate in his response. Without a doubt, Mrs. Victoria. She knows these machines better than anyone I've ever seen work here. She inherited her father's talent and knowledge, but developed her own techniques that even improved some processes. If anyone can save us, it's her. And where is she working now? At John Charles's shop downtown. But Mrs. Victoria, I must tell you that she was deeply hurt by what happened. I don't know if she'll want to come back even if you ask her. The information about Rachel's emotional state added an extra layer of complexity to the already complicated situation. Victoria needed not only to swallow her pride and admit the mistake, but also to find a way to repair the emotional damage caused to the young mechanic. It would take much more than a simple job offer to regain the lost trust. Do you have the shop's phone number? Yes, I do. But Mrs. Victoria, perhaps it's better to go in person. Some conversations need to be face-to-face, especially when they involve asking for forgiveness. Samuel's suggestion made sense, but it also stirred anxiety in Victoria. Publicly admitting error had always been one of the hardest things for her. especially after so many situations where people tried to take advantage of her vulnerabilities. But now there was no choice. The survival of the ranch depended on her ability to overcome her pride and seek reconciliation. "Prepare the car, Samuel. We're going to town today." The trip to town took 40 minutes along rural roads that wound through crops and small rural properties. Victoria watched the familiar landscape from the window of the adapted car, noticing the signs of the approaching harvest season. The golden yellow of mature soybeans, the intense movement of tractors in neighboring fields, and the air of anticipation that always accompanied this crucial phase of the agricultural year. John Charles's shop was on a narrow street in the historic downtown, between a hardware store and a bakery that gave off the inviting aroma of fresh bread. The old brick building contrasted with the modern constructions around it, creating a nostalgic charm reminiscent of simpler times in the American heartland. Samuel parked the car in front of the shop and helped Victoria down, carefully positioning the wheelchair on the uneven sidewalk. The sound of tools and the rumble of engines came from inside the establishment, signs that work was happening intensely, even in the middle of the afternoon. "Mrs. Victoria, do you want me to go in first to check if she's willing to talk?" offered the foreman. "No, Samuel. This is something I need to do personally. I made the mistake alone. I need to fix it alone." The businesswoman took a deep breath and steered the wheelchair toward the shop's entrance. The smell of oil, grease, and heated metal brought back childhood memories when she used to accompany her father on visits to the ranch's machine sheds. It was an environment that had always fascinated her, where skilled men turned broken iron into working equipment as if practicing magic. Rachel was crouched beside a small red tractor, her hands covered in work gloves, precisely adjusting the connections of the electrical system. She wore the same type of green coveralls she used at the ranch, but now there was a different concentration in her movements, as if every gesture was calculated to extract the maximum efficiency from the equipment. The young woman looked up when she noticed someone at the workshop entrance. Recognition was instant, followed by an expression of surprise that quickly turned into defensive caution. Rachel stood up slowly, wiping her hands on a cloth she pulled from her overalls pocket. "Mrs. Victoria," she said in a controlled voice, but without any warmth or familiarity. "What brings you here?" The formal and distant tone confirmed Victoria's fears about Rachel's emotional state. Where there had once been enthusiasm and dedication, now there was only cold professionalism and emotional protection. The businesswoman felt the weight of responsibility for this transformation, knowing her actions had destroyed something precious. "Rachel, I came here to talk with you, to apologize and perhaps discuss the possibility of you returning to the ranch." The mechanic crossed her arms over her chest and tilted her head slightly, a posture Victoria recognized as preparation for a difficult conversation. John Charles, the workshop owner, noticed the tension in the air and discreetly moved away to give them privacy. "Apologies for what exactly? For accusing me of industrial espionage, for throwing me off the ranch like a criminal, or for destroying my professional reputation in the region?" Each of Rachel's words struck Victoria like a precise stab. The businesswoman had never fully considered the impact of her actions on the mechanic's professional life. In a small rural community where everyone knew each other and reputations were built over decades, an accusation of dishonesty could be devastating to any professional's career. "For all of that, Rachel, I was completely wrong. I let my paranoia and distrust override reason. Samuel told me you had warned about problems with the equipment, and now all of them have broken down exactly as you predicted." Rachel's expression softened slightly, but her guard remained high. It was obvious she was processing not just Victoria's words, but also evaluating the true motivations behind the unexpected visit. "And what do you want from me now? That I come running back to save your ranch after being publicly humiliated?" The direct question forced Victoria to confront the raw reality of the situation. She really was there primarily out of need, not from a genuine impulse for justice or reconciliation. But at the same time, the reflection process of recent days had awakened a deeper understanding of her own limitations and the importance of trusting the right people. "Rachel, I won't lie to you. Yes, I'm here because I desperately need your help. But I'm also here because I've finally understood that I committed a terrible injustice. You're Joseph Turner's daughter, aren't you? The mention of her father's name brought an immediate change in Rachel's expression. Her defenses lowered momentarily, replaced by a mixture of surprise and emotion that she quickly tried to control. How did you know? Samuel told me. He said your father was one of the best workers the ranch ever had, and that you inherited his knowledge about the old equipment. I remembered Joseph. He was a good man, honest, dedicated. If I had made the connection earlier, perhaps none of this would have happened. Rachel looked at the workshop floor for a few seconds, clearly wrestling with conflicting emotions. When she looked up again, there were restrained tears she struggled not to shed. My father always spoke of Meadowbrook Ranch with great affection. He said they were the best years of his professional life. When I got the job there, it was like fulfilling a childhood dream. That's why it hurt so much to be treated that way. The account deeply moved Victoria, who began to understand the emotional extent of the damage she had caused. It wasn't just about a lost job, but the destruction of a dream cultivated for years, a family connection that transcended normal professional relationships. Rachel, I know I can't undo what happened, but I'd like to offer an opportunity for us to start over, not just as boss and employee, but as partners in a larger project. The word partners sparked curiosity in Rachel's eyes. Victoria noticed she had touched on something important and decided to develop the idea forming in her mind at that very moment. What do you mean by partners? I mean, I recognize your value and would like to propose something more than just a simple job. You have unique knowledge about vintage equipment that's rare in today's market. Perhaps we can turn this into something bigger, a specialization for the ranch that benefits not only Meadowbrook, but the entire region. The proposal was vague, but Rachel sensed the potential behind Victoria's words. For years, she had dreamed of the possibility of creating a workshop specialized in vintage agricultural equipment, using the knowledge inherited from her father and her own technical innovations. That sounds interesting, but I need guarantees that I won't be fired at the first unfounded suspicion. I need professional respect and recognition for my work. You'll have all that, Rachel, and more. Complete autonomy to develop your technical projects. I want you to turn our maintenance into a regional reference. The conversation was interrupted by the unexpected arrival of Anthony Mitchell, a small farmer from the area whom Victoria knew by sight from local cooperative meetings. The man of about 60 arrived at the workshop in a visibly desperate state, his eyes showing the worry of someone facing a crisis that could destroy his livelihood. Please, can someone help me? Anthony pleaded, addressing Rachel. My tractor broke down completely this morning, and it's the only machine I have to prepare the land for bean planting. If I miss this deadline, my family will have no income for the next 6 months. Rachel immediately abandoned the conversation with Victoria and approached the desperate farmer. Her transformation was instant, from a hurt woman discussing personal matters to a dedicated professional focused on solving an urgent problem. Calm down, Mr. Anthony. Let's take a look at your tractor. Where is it? It's on the trailer outside. It's a very old model from 1982. I've taken it to other shops, but everyone said it's not worth fixing, that it's better to buy another one. But I don't have money for that. Rachel left the workshop followed by Anthony, leaving Victoria alone to observe the unfolding situation. The businesswoman wheeled her chair to the entrance and watched the technical analysis Rachel was performing on the broken equipment. The tractor was visibly worn from use and years, its paint faded, and some components showing clear signs of advanced age. But Rachel examined it with the affection of someone who saw potential where others saw only scrap metal. Her experienced hands touched different parts of the engine, while her ears captured the sounds the machine produced when Anthony tried to start it. The problem is in the injection system, Mr. Anthony. It's a part they don't make anymore, but I can adapt a more modern component to work in your tractor. It'll take a few hours of work, but it's completely feasible. And how much will it cost? Asked the farmer apprehensively. For you, it won't cost anything. I know about your situation, and all of us in the rural area need to help each other. Rachel's generosity surprised Victoria, who was watching the scene from inside the car. The young mechanic not only possessed exceptional technical knowledge, but also demonstrated a social sensitivity rarely found in the modern corporate world. She was the type of person who could transform a business not just through competence, but through genuine human values. Rachel worked for the next 3 hours with total concentration, adapting modern components to function in the tractor's old system. Victoria remained watching, fascinated by the precision of the movements and the creativity of the solutions found. It was evident that the young woman had inherited much more than technical knowledge from her father. She had also absorbed the passion for the profession and the commitment to excellence. When the engine finally started with a healthy roar, Anthony's face lit up as if he had witnessed a miracle. His tears of gratitude were visible as he shook Rachel's hands and hugged her emotionally. The scene deeply touched Victoria, who began to understand the true character of the person she had unfairly fired. "Thank you so much, young lady. You saved my family. How can I repay you?" "By taking good care of your tractor and spreading the word that old equipment can indeed be saved with the right knowledge," Rachel replied with a genuine smile. After Anthony's departure with his tractor working perfectly, Rachel returned to where Victoria was waiting. The businesswoman had witnessed a practical demonstration not only of the young woman's technical competence, but also of her personal values and social commitment. "Rachel, what I just saw was impressive. Not just your technical skill, but your generosity with someone who needed help. That's how my dad taught me to work. He said our profession exists to serve people, not just to make money." The work philosophy expressed by Rachel resonated deeply with the values Victoria had learned from her own parents, but had lost sight of over the years of struggle to maintain and expand the businesses. The obsessive pursuit of protection against betrayals had made her forget the importance of genuine human connections. "Rachel, I would like to revise my proposal. I don't just want you to come back to work at the ranch. I want you to be my partner in a project to create the region's first vintage equipment restoration and maintenance center. A place where people like Anthony can bring their old machines and receive the treatment they deserve." The expanded proposal surprised Rachel, who clearly hadn't expected a partnership offer. Her eyes shone with interest, but caution still remained present in her facial expression. "Is this a serious proposal, Mrs. Victoria?" "Completely serious. I have the capital for initial investment, and you have the specialized knowledge. Together we can create something unique that benefits the entire region and preserves technical knowledge that is being lost over the years." The idea of preserving the technical knowledge inherited from her father was particularly attractive to Rachel. For years she had worried that the specific skills for maintaining old equipment were disappearing as older generations of mechanics retired or passed away. "But I have conditions, Mrs. Victoria. First, I want full autonomy for technical decisions. Second, I demand mutual respect and open communication about any concerns. Third, I want a share in the restoration center's profits." The conditions were fair and demonstrated that Rachel had learned to value herself professionally after the traumatic experience of being fired. Victoria recognized that she was facing an equal-to-equal negotiation, no longer a boss-to-employee one. "I accept all your conditions, Rachel. But we have an urgent problem that needs to be solved first. The ranch equipment is all broken, the harvest needs to begin in less than 2 weeks, and you're the only person who can save us." Rachel looked at Victoria with an expression mixing determination and concern. The situation described was exactly the type of technical challenge she loved tackling, but it also represented enormous pressure considering the extremely tight deadline. 2 weeks is very little time to repair an entire fleet of equipment, Mrs. Victoria. I'll need to work day and night, and even then I can't guarantee I'll manage. "I know it's an enormous challenge, Rachel, but you're our only hope, and I promise that this time you'll have all the necessary support and resources. Samuel will be instructed to give you full assistance, and any part or tool you need will be arranged immediately." The commitment to total support was important to Rachel, who knew from experience that the quality of logistical support could make the difference between success and failure in complex projects. She also realized this would be an opportunity to definitively prove her professional worth. "All right, Mrs. Victoria, I accept returning and trying to save the harvest, but I want to make it clear this will be our trial partnership. If everything goes well, we can discuss the Restoration Center project." The hand extended by Rachel was accepted by Victoria in a firm handshake that sealed much more than a professional agreement. It was the beginning of a partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals, very different from the hierarchical relationship that had existed previously. The next morning, Rachel arrived at Meadowbrook Ranch before sunrise, carrying her toolbox and an iron determination to face the challenge that could define her professional career. The rural landscape was wrapped in the morning fog, typical of the Texas countryside, creating an almost mystical atmosphere over the fields awaiting harvest season. Samuel greeted her with a relieved and genuine smile. The foreman had spent the previous night organizing a detailed list of all problems identified in each piece of equipment, creating a work plan that would maximize repair efficiency. "Welcome back, Rachel. All the tractors are in the main shed, and I've separated all the tools available at the ranch. Mrs. Victoria sent word that anything you need will be arranged immediately." The demonstration of organizational support contrasted drastically with the environment of suspicion that had characterized her first stint at the ranch. Rachel realized Victoria was keeping her promise to offer all the necessary support for the project's success. "Thank you, Mr. Samuel. I'll start by doing a complete assessment of all equipment to prioritize repairs. The tractors essential for harvesting come first." The initial assessment confirmed Rachel's fears about the task's complexity. 7 tractors had serious problems requiring everything from component replacement to complete rebuilding of entire systems. Most concerning was that 3 of the most important harvesting machines had defects that could take days to resolve. During the technical analysis, Rachel discovered something that explained the simultaneity of the problems. All affected equipment used the same type of hydraulic oil, which had apparently been contaminated with water during storage. The contamination had caused internal corrosion in the systems, resulting in the multiple defects that seemed mysterious at first glance. The discovery was immediately communicated to Victoria, who met with Rachel in the main shed to discuss the implications and possible solutions. The businesswoman arrived mid-morning, finding the mechanic completely focused on her diagnostics. "Rachel, Samuel said you've identified the cause of the problems." "Yes, Mrs. Victoria. It was water contamination in the hydraulic oil. This explains why so many equipment units had issues simultaneously. The good news is we know exactly what needs to be done. The bad news is it'll require complete disassembly of the hydraulic systems in all affected tractors." The technical explanation reassured Victoria that they finally had a clear diagnosis, but also worried her due to the extent of the work required. Complete disassembly meant considerable time, and time was exactly what they didn't have. "How long do you estimate for all repairs?" "Working 16 hours a day, with Samuel's help, and 2 more assistants, I believe we can manage in 10 days. But it'll require superhuman effort and lots of luck with part supply." The estimate was at the limit of the available deadline, but offered real hope for salvation. Victoria decided to mobilize all necessary resources to support Rachel's work, including hiring additional assistants and creating an on-call system to ensure nothing delayed progress. "You'll have everything you need, Rachel. I'll organize support shifts, buy all necessary parts with express delivery, and arrange extra lighting so you can work through the night if needed." Victoria's demonstration of commitment impressed Rachel, who began realizing the businesswoman was genuinely remorseful and determined to repair the damage caused. This was a very different attitude from the paranoid distrust that had characterized their previous interactions. The first day of intensive work began with disassembling the tractor most critical to the harvesting operation. Rachel worked with surgical precision, removing contaminated components and cataloging every part that needed replacement. Samuel and 2 young ranch workers assisted as helpers, learning specialized techniques while contributing to the collective effort. During the work, Rachel began sharing stories and knowledge she'd learned from her father, turning the machine shed into a kind of informal vintage mechanics school. The young workers were fascinated with traditional techniques that combined empirical knowledge with practical creativity. "My dad always said every tractor has its own personality," Rachel explained, while adjusting a delicate hydraulic connection. "You need to learn to listen to what the machine is trying to tell you through sounds, vibrations, and behaviors." The humanized philosophy of mechanics created a work atmosphere very different from the purely technical approach most modern workshops adopted. Victoria, who watched the work from her wheelchair positioned strategically to monitor progress, was impressed with the natural leadership Rachel exercised over the team. On the second day, an unexpected problem threatened to compromise the entire schedule. The main hydraulic system component of the most important tractor had been damaged beyond repair, and the supplier informed them a replacement would take at least a week to arrive. This was exactly the kind of setback that could destroy all hopes of saving the harvest. Rachel studied the damaged component for hours, trying to find an alternative solution. The part was a specialized hydraulic cylinder that had been manufactured specifically for that tractor model in the 1980s. Direct replacements simply didn't exist in the current market. "Mrs. Victoria, we have a serious problem," Rachel communicated during a lunch break. "This part doesn't exist anymore, and adapting a modern component will require structural modifications that could take days." The news hit Victoria like a punch in the gut. After so much progress and renewed hopes, the possibility of failure because of a single obsolete part was devastating. She looked at the damaged component in her hands, trying to understand how something so small could have such a huge impact. "Isn't there any alternative? No place that still has parts for this model?" Rachel hesitated before answering, as if considering an option she wasn't sure she should mention. Her eyes showed that an idea was forming, but also that she didn't know if it would be feasible. "There is a possibility, Mrs. Victoria. My dad always talked about a specialized junkyard about 200 kilometers from here. The owner is a collector of old parts who might have exactly what we need, but it's a long trip, and I don't even know if the place still exists." The renewed hope made Victoria's heart race. Any possibility, however remote, was worth exploring given the desperate circumstances they faced. How many hours of travel? About 4 hours to get there, if I can remember the way correctly. "But Mrs. Victoria, this will consume a whole workday and every hour is precious right now." The dilemma was real. Invest a full day in an uncertain possibility, or keep trying to adapt modern components with equally uncertain results. Victoria needed to make a decision that could determine the success or failure of the entire project. "Let's try the junkyard," she finally decided. "It's a gamble, but it might be our best chance. Samuel can continue with the other repairs while you go get the part." The trip was quickly organized, with Victoria insisting on accompanying Rachel to demonstrate her total commitment to the project. The route wound through rural roads that passed through small country towns, bucolic landscapes, and agricultural properties that reflected the region's rural tradition. During the trip, the two women talked more deeply than they ever had before. Rachel shared childhood memories of listening to her father's stories about Meadowbrook Ranch, while Victoria recalled the property's golden age when Joseph Turner kept all the equipment running perfectly. "My dad always said that working at Meadowbrook was the happiest time of his professional life," Rachel revealed as she drove down the country road. "He felt like part of something important, not just an employee." "Joseph was truly special," Victoria agreed. "I was younger at the time and didn't fully understand his value. My parents always said he treated the ranch as if it were his own property." The conversation helped heal some of the emotional wounds that still lingered between them. Victoria began to understand that firing Rachel hadn't just harmed an employee, but had also interrupted an important generational connection between the ranch and the Turner family. Martin Sanders's junkyard was located on an isolated rural property, surrounded by mountains of old equipment, abandoned tractors, and machine parts that seemed to form an open-air museum of American agricultural history. The place had a unique atmosphere where the past remained alive through rusty metal and preserved memories. Martin, a 70-year-old man with completely white hair and hands marked by decades of working with iron and oil, greeted the visitors with curiosity. When Rachel introduced herself as Joseph Turner's daughter, the old man's eyes lit up with genuine emotion. "Rachel Turner, Joseph's daughter. My God, how you've grown. Your father was my best friend when we worked together. How is he?" The question about her father brought tears to Rachel's eyes, and she needed a moment to steady her voice before answering. "Dad passed away 10 years ago, Mr. Martin, but he always spoke of you with great fondness." The news deeply saddened the old junkyard owner, who had lost touch with his friend over the years. He embraced Rachel with the affection of someone rediscovering a piece of the past, and his tears mingled longing and gratitude for the chance to meet his companion's daughter. "Your father was one of the most honest men I've ever known. What do you need? If I have it, it's yours for free, in honor of his memory." The unexpected generosity moved both Rachel and Victoria deeply. The rural world still preserved values of solidarity and loyalty that seemed to be fading in modern society. Martin represented a generation of men who valued friendship and keeping one's word above financial profit. Rachel explained in detail the part they needed, and Martin immediately knew exactly where to find it in his vast collection. He had kept components from dozens of old tractors over the years, organizing them by model and year of manufacture. "I have exactly what you need," he announced with satisfaction, heading toward a specific stack of catalogued parts. "This hydraulic cylinder is in perfect condition, taken from a tractor that was dismantled but never used intensively." The part was exactly what they needed, in much better condition than they had dared to hope. Martin categorically refused to accept any payment, insisting it was a tribute to Joseph Turner's memory and a contribution to his daughter's professional future. The return trip was filled with renewed optimism and a growing sense that they might meet the seemingly impossible deadline. Rachel drove with more confidence, knowing she held the key to solving the most critical problem of the entire project. "Mrs. Victoria," Rachel said during the return journey, "today I understood something important. We're not just repairing tractors, we're preserving human connections and keeping alive a tradition my father helped build." The observation touched Victoria deeply, who was beginning to realize that Meadowbrook Ranch was much more than a business. It was a cultural heritage connecting generations of rural workers and preserving knowledge that was being lost over time. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. The installation of the part obtained from the junkyard was a moment of extreme tension. Rachel worked with watchmaker precision, while Victoria held the flashlight and Samuel organized the tools. Every movement was carefully calculated, as there was no room for error with such a tight deadline. The engine started on the first try, producing the healthy rumble of a well-tuned machine. The relief was instant and profound, followed by spontaneous hugs that sealed the partnership forming among the three people who had worked together to overcome the challenge. From that moment on, the work gained a fast but controlled pace. Repairs to the remaining equipment were completed systematically, with Rachel applying traditional techniques learned from her father, combined with creative adaptations that optimized the performance of the old machines. During the long work days, a natural camaraderie developed between Rachel and Victoria. The businesswoman began to understand the technical aspects of agricultural maintenance, while the mechanic gained insights into business management and strategic planning. In the last 2 days before the deadline, the work intensified to almost superhuman levels. Rachel slept only 3 hours a night, alternating between different equipment to maximize repair efficiency. Victoria remained in the shed until late hours, offering moral support and organizing necessary resources. On the eve of the scheduled harvest start, the final tractor was successfully tested. The complete fleet was functioning not just adequately, but with performance superior to what they had before the problems began. Rachel had taken advantage of the repairs to implement small improvements that optimized various systems. The harvest began on schedule, with all equipment operating in perfect sync. The first days of work confirmed that productivity was above expectations, partially compensating for the time lost during the broken equipment crisis. Victoria monitored the harvest operations from her wheelchair positioned strategically to have a complete view of the fields. The satisfaction of seeing the results of hard work materialize in golden grains being efficiently harvested was deeply rewarding. During a lunch break on the 5th day of harvest, Victoria called Rachel for a private conversation in the office where everything had begun. The environment that had witnessed the explosion of anger and distrust now served as the setting for a discussion about future partnerships and ambitious projects. Rachel, what you just accomplished here was extraordinary. Not only did you save our harvest, but you proved that traditional knowledge combined with innovation can produce exceptional results. The mechanic smiled modestly, but her eyes shone with the pride of someone who had overcome a challenge many would consider impossible. Thank you, Mrs. Victoria. But this was a team effort. Samuel and the boys were fundamental to the success. Now I would like to formalize our partnership in the Restoration Center project. I have a concrete proposal to present. Victoria opened a folder containing architectural plans, financial feasibility studies, and market projections she had prepared during the nights when she couldn't sleep due to anxiety about the harvest. The project was ambitious but carefully planned. I want to transform the auxiliary shed into a technical center specialized in vintage equipment. You would be the technical manager with a 40% ownership stake. The goal is to serve not just our ranch but the entire region. The plans showed a modern space yet respectful of traditions, with areas for workshop, parts storage, training room, and even a small museum dedicated to the history of regional agricultural mechanization. It was exactly the kind of project Rachel had always dreamed of developing. Mrs. Victoria, this is much more than I imagined. 40% ownership is extremely generous. You deserve this and much more, Rachel. Your competence and dedication saved not just this harvest, but possibly the entire ranch. Furthermore, I want this center to be your legacy, just as your father left his here. The mention of paternal legacy touched Rachel deeply, who envisioned the opportunity to honor her father's memory while building her own professional future. The Restoration Center could become a national reference in preserving historical agricultural equipment. I accept the partnership, Mrs. Victoria, but I would like to add one condition. I want the center to have a free training program for local youth interested in traditional agricultural mechanics. The social responsibility proposal impressed Victoria, who recognized in it the values she had always admired in her own family. The center wouldn't just be a profitable business, but also a contribution to the rural community's development. A perfect addition to the project, Rachel. We can name the training program Joseph Turner, in honor of your father. The suggestion deeply moved Rachel, who felt as if all the pieces of her professional life were finally falling into place harmoniously. The dream of honoring her father's memory while building her own path was becoming a reality in a more magnificent way than she had ever imagined. The conversation was interrupted by Samuel's arrival, who brought news about the exceptionally good progress of the harvest. Productivity was surpassing all predictions, and the grain quality was excellent due to the perfect timing of the work. Mrs. Victoria, Rachel, we have reasons to celebrate. This will be one of the best harvests in Meadowbrook's history, both in quantity and quality. The good news confirmed that all the hardship and effort of the past months had been worth it. The crisis that nearly destroyed the ranch had transformed into the opportunity to create something even better and more sustainable. During the following weeks, as the harvest was completed with extraordinary success, preparations for the Restoration Center gained speed. Rachel divided her time between maintaining the ranch's equipment and detailed planning of the facilities that would house her new company. News about the project spread quickly throughout the region, sparking interest from farmers who owned old but functional equipment needing specialized maintenance. Quote requests began arriving even before the center's official opening. One of the first customers was Anthony Mitchell, the small farmer Rachel had helped for free at the town workshop. He brought his newly repaired tractor for a preventive checkup, but mainly to show his gratitude and offer support to the new venture. Rachel, you changed my life when you fixed my tractor that day. Now I want to be one of your center's first official customers. The loyalty of customers Rachel had earned through competence and generosity became the solid foundation for the business's growth. Word-of-mouth recommendations in the rural community had invaluable worth, especially when based on real experiences of quality and reliability. 3 months after the Joseph Turner Technical Center's opening, demand already exceeded service capacity. Rachel needed to hire 2 additional mechanics and expand the facility's physical space. The free training program was also attracting young people from various towns in the region. Victoria observed the project's growth with deep satisfaction, knowing her decision to bet on Rachel had been one of the best in her business career. The partnership was generating significant financial profits, but also creating social value that transcended purely commercial aspects. 1 year after the events that nearly destroyed their friendship before it even began, Victoria and Rachel met again in the ranch office to evaluate their partnership's results. The walls now displayed certificates and recognitions the center had received from regional agricultural organizations. Rachel, when I look back and think about how it all started, I'm amazed by how much our lives have changed. The mechanic, now a respected business partner and recognized vintage equipment expert, smiled while remembering the difficult moments they had overcome together. Mrs. Victoria, I've learned that sometimes life's worst moments can turn into the best opportunities if we're willing to forgive and start over. The philosophy expressed by Rachel perfectly summarized the transformation both had experienced. Victoria Harrington had learned to control her paranoia and trust people who demonstrated competence and solid values. Rachel Turner had developed business skills that complemented her technical expertise. The Restoration Center had become a national reference in preserving historical agricultural equipment, attracting visitors and researchers from various universities. The training program had already graduated dozens of young specialized mechanics, creating a new generation of professionals dedicated to preserving traditional knowledge. 2 years later, during the inauguration of the center's expansion, that included an interactive museum about the history of American agricultural mechanization, Victoria gave an emotional speech to guests, including local authorities, rural producers, and students. This project was born from my mistake, from an explosion of anger and distrust that nearly destroyed the professional life of an extraordinary person. But Rachel Turner taught me that forgiveness and second chances can create more beautiful things than we ever imagined possible. The speech deeply moved the audience, especially because Victoria rarely showed vulnerability in public. Her ability to admit mistakes and value the people who helped her grow as a businesswoman and human being inspired many present. Rachel also spoke during the ceremony, dedicating the museum to the memory of her father and all the rural workers who built the region's agricultural tradition through knowledge, dedication, and love for the land. My father always said, "Our work exists to serve people and the land that sustains us." This center is our way of honoring that philosophy and ensuring knowledge isn't lost with passing generations. The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of a bronze statue of Joseph Turner, depicted working on an old tractor. The artwork captured not just the mechanic's physical image, but also his essence of dedication and competence that had inspired all that transformation. In the years that followed, the partnership between Victoria and Rachel continued flourishing and diversifying. The technical center expanded to include research and development of sustainable technologies that combined tradition and innovation. They developed precision agriculture systems adapted for older equipment, creating unique market solutions. Meadowbrook Ranch became a model of collaborative management and social inclusion, visited by researchers and business people from various parts of the world. The training program evolved into a rural technical school recognized by the Department of Education, offering complete courses in traditional and sustainable agricultural mechanics. Rachel married Charles Albert, one of the young men she had trained in the center's program, and they had 2 children who grew up playing among old tractors and learning from an early age the values of work, dedication, and respect for nature. The family built a house on the ranch property, further strengthening bonds with the land Joseph Turner had loved. Victoria, who had never married as she concentrated all her energy on her business career, found in her partnership with Rachel a professional family that filled important aspects of her emotional life. She became godmother to Rachel's children, creating emotional bonds that transcended business relationships. One Sunday afternoon, 10 years after the episode that nearly destroyed their lives, Victoria and Rachel walked, she in her wheelchair and Rachel on foot, through the fields of Meadowbrook Ranch, observing the new generation of equipment that combined modern technology with the reliable robustness of older machines. Rachel, do you regret anything that happened over these years? The question made the mechanic stop and reflect deeply before answering. She gazed at the golden fields stretching to the horizon, at the workshops of the technical center where young people learned traditional trades, and at the house where her family lived in harmony with nature. Mrs. Victoria, I regret only one thing, not having revealed from the start that I was Joseph Turner's daughter. If I had been more open about my family history, perhaps that misunderstanding would never have happened. Victoria smiled upon hearing her partner and friend's response, and I regret letting fear and distrust control my actions, but perhaps everything needed to happen exactly as it did for us to become the people we are today. The reflection revealed a wisdom gained through difficult experiences and personal transformations. Both had learned valuable lessons about trust, forgiveness, partnership, and the importance of valuing the right people when they appear in our lives. The sun set over the fields of Meadowbrook Ranch, creating a golden landscape that symbolized the prosperity achieved through hard work, mutual respect, and the ability to turn conflicts into opportunities for growth. The following week, an unexpected surprise brought a new emotional dimension to the story of Victoria and Rachel. Martin Sanders, the scrap dealer who had donated the crucial part years earlier, appeared at the ranch carrying a mysterious box that he said had belonged to Joseph Turner. Rachel, I found this box among the things your father left stored here. I think you should have it. The box contained notebooks with detailed technical notes, old photographs of Meadowbrook Ranch, and letters that Joseph had written but never sent, expressing his love for the property and his hope that one day his daughter could work in the same place that had brought him so much professional satisfaction. One of the letters, dated just a few years before Joseph's departure, described his dream of seeing Rachel transform agricultural maintenance into an art that combined family tradition with technical innovation. It was as if he had foreseen exactly the path she would end up following. The discovery deeply moved both Rachel and Victoria, who understood they were fulfilling not only their own dreams, but also the dreams of a previous generation that had planted the seeds for everything they had built together. Joseph's technical notebook became a treasure for the Restoration Center, containing secrets and traditional techniques that not even Rachel fully knew. Several innovations described on the yellowed pages were successfully implemented, further improving the quality of services offered. The story spread throughout the region as a powerful example of how forgiveness, determination, and teamwork can overcome the greatest challenges. Business administration students from various universities visited the ranch to study the partnership model developed between Victoria and Rachel. In recognition of the project's social and economic impact, the partnership received the National Rural Innovation Award, being highlighted as an example of how to preserve traditions while developing sustainable technologies. The award was received at a televised national ceremony, giving even greater visibility to their work. During the award ceremony, Victoria made sure to share the stage equally with Rachel, emphasizing that the success was the result of a truly balanced partnership. Her speech highlighted the importance of giving second chances and valuing traditional knowledge in an increasingly digital world. Rachel's speech focused on the importance of honoring previous generations while building a sustainable future. She dedicated the award to the memory of her father and all the rural workers who preserved essential knowledge for American agriculture. After the award ceremony, dozens of expansion proposals arrived from other regions across the country. Farmers, universities, and even the government expressed interest in replicating the model developed at Meadowbrook Ranch. It was the recognition that they had created something truly innovative and valuable. The decision to expand was made carefully, prioritizing regions where there was real demand for preserving old equipment and genuine interest in developing social training programs. The first affiliated center was inaugurated in Montana, followed by units in Colorado and Kansas. Each new unit maintained the original philosophy of combining technical excellence with social responsibility, offering free training for at-risk youth and preserving local traditional knowledge. The network became a national reference for sustainable agriculture and social inclusion. 15 years after the episode that nearly destroyed their lives, Victoria and Rachel inaugurated the National Center for Traditional Agricultural Knowledge Preservation, a research institute that documented and preserved techniques developed by generations of American farmers. The institute attracted international researchers interested in studying how the United States had managed to combine tradition and innovation so efficiently. Partnerships were established with universities from various countries, turning the place into a global reference for sustainable agriculture. The institute's library housed thousands of documents, photographs, videos, and objects that told the story of American agricultural mechanization. An entire wing was dedicated to the memory of Joseph Turner and other traditional mechanics who had contributed to the sector's development. During the Institute's inauguration ceremony, Victoria reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a misunderstanding in her ranch's office. The 67-year-old businesswoman, now nationally recognized for her innovative vision and social commitment, could hardly believe everything that had been built. "Sometimes I think that morning when I found you going through the papers was the most important day of my business life," she confessed to Rachel during a private moment before the ceremony. "If I hadn't made that terrible mistake, perhaps we would never have discovered the extraordinary potential of our partnership." Rachel, now 42 and recognized as one of the world's leading experts in vintage agricultural equipment, smiled upon hearing her friend and partner's words. "Mrs. Victoria, I've learned that the worst mistakes can turn into the best opportunities when we have the courage to admit faults and work together to fix them." The philosophy that had guided their partnership over the years remained relevant and inspiring. They had proven that conflict, when resolved with wisdom and goodwill, can generate stronger collaboration than any union that has never faced challenges. The Institute became a pilgrimage center for entrepreneurs interested in developing partnerships based on mutual trust and shared values. The management model developed by Victoria and Rachel was studied in business schools as an example of how to turn crisis into opportunity. In the years that followed, the network of technical centers continued to grow sustainably, always prioritizing quality over quantity. Each new unit was carefully planned to meet the specific needs of its region, respecting local traditions while maintaining the established standards of excellence. The training program had graduated more than 5,000 specialized young mechanics, creating a new generation of professionals dedicated to preserving traditional knowledge. Many of these young people opened their own workshops, spreading the work philosophy developed by Rachel throughout the country. Victoria gradually developed a new vision for business leadership, focused on human development and creating social value. She became a sought-after speaker at corporate events, sharing lessons learned about how to transform distrust into trust and conflict into collaboration. Rachel progressively took on more responsibilities in the strategic management of the network, applying her technical experience to develop new sustainable business models. She specialized in precision agriculture, adapted for older equipment, creating unique solutions that combined tradition and technology. Meadowbrook Ranch continued to be the heart of the entire operation, serving as a laboratory for developing new techniques and a training center for the network's professionals. The property became a symbol of how traditional and modern agriculture could coexist harmoniously. 20 years after the beginning of their partnership, Victoria decided to gradually transfer her operational responsibilities to Rachel, remaining as a strategic consultant and guardian of the values that had guided the company's development. The transition was carefully planned to preserve the unique organizational culture they had created. The transition ceremony took place in the same office where everything had begun, now transformed into a museum that preserved the memory of the decisive moments of their partnership. Representatives from all units of the network were present, as well as authorities and business people who had been inspired by their model. Rachel, upon officially assuming leadership of the organization they had built together, gave an emotional speech that summarized the extraordinary journey they had traveled since that tumultuous September morning. "Mrs. Victoria taught me that true leadership means having the courage to admit mistakes, the wisdom to identify talent, and the generosity to share successes. I hope to honor these teachings as I lead our organization into the future." Victoria's speech was a reflection on how her life had been transformed by her partnership with Rachel. The 72-year-old businesswoman, now considered a pioneer in sustainable agriculture and corporate social responsibility, expressed deep gratitude for the journey they had shared. Rachel transformed my company, my worldview, and my understanding of what truly matters in business. She taught me that true success is not measured only in financial profits, but in the ability to create value for people and for society. After the ceremony, the two women walked together one last time through the fields of Meadowbrook Ranch as active partners. The afternoon sun illuminated the modern equipment, working in harmony with restored vintage machines, creating a landscape that perfectly symbolized the philosophy they had developed. Victoria continued living in the main house of the ranch, dedicating her time to writing a book about her business experience and mentoring young entrepreneurs interested in developing socially responsible businesses. Her home became a meeting point for discussions about the future of agriculture and environmental sustainability. Rachel took the lead of the organization with the wisdom accumulated over 2 decades of successful partnership. Under her direction, the network continued to expand sustainably, always maintaining the core values of technical quality, social responsibility, and preservation of traditional knowledge. The story of their partnership became a case study in universities worldwide, an example of how initial conflict can be transformed into lasting collaboration through forgiveness, hard work, and shared values. Documentaries were produced, books written, and academic research developed about their management model. The most important legacy, however, wasn't in the awards received or the international recognition. It was in the lives of thousands of young people who had found purpose and dignity through the training programs, in the families of small farmers who managed to preserve their equipment and their traditions, and in the practical demonstration that businesses can be powerful tools for positive social transformation. On a sunny spring afternoon, 25 years after that fateful morning that nearly destroyed their lives, Victoria and Rachel met in the office that now served as a museum to celebrate the opening of the 100th unit in the Technical Center network. This historic milestone represented much more than business growth. It was confirmation that they had created something truly transformative, capable of preserving traditions while building sustainable futures for rural communities throughout the United States. Rachel, now 57 and internationally recognized as a leader in sustainable agriculture, looked at the photographs on the walls documenting the evolution of their partnership. Each image told part of the story of how two women had overcome initial differences to create something extraordinary. "Mrs. Victoria," Rachel said with emotion in her voice, "when I look at everything we managed to build, I'm amazed by the power of forgiveness and second chances." Victoria, at 77, maintained the clarity and passion for innovation that had always characterized her. Her wheelchair was now electric and equipped with advanced technology, but her energy for discussions about the future remained unchanged. "And I'm amazed, Rachel, by the power of true partnership. Alone, we would never have managed to create something so meaningful. Together, we changed not only our own lives, but the lives of thousands of people." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mary Elizabeth, Rachel's daughter, now graduated in agricultural engineering and preparing to take on responsibilities in the organization. The 22-year-old represented the third generation of the Turner family, dedicated to agricultural work, continuing the legacy started by her grandfather Joseph. "Grandma Victoria, Mom, the guests have arrived for the ceremony," announced Mary Elizabeth with the typical enthusiasm of youth combined with respect for family tradition. The affectionate term Grandma Victoria reflected the family bonds that had developed over the years. Victoria had become an integral part of the Turner family, just as the family's values had become an integral part of her business vision. The inauguration ceremony for the 100th unit took place in the Institute's amphitheater, with live broadcast to all other units in the network. National and international authorities attended the event, recognizing the importance of the developed model for the future of world agriculture. The main speech was given jointly by Victoria and Rachel, symbolizing the partnership that had made everything possible. They alternated sections of the presentation, demonstrating the harmony and complementarity that characterized their collaboration after so many years. "We began this journey with a conflict based on misunderstandings and distrust," Victoria started. "But we learned that the greatest successes sometimes come from the greatest challenges." when we have the courage to face them with honesty and joint work. Rachel continued, "We discovered that preserving traditions doesn't mean rejecting innovation, just as innovating doesn't mean abandoning time-tested knowledge. The secret lies in finding the balance that respects the past while building the future." The audience, composed of representatives from all network units, government officials, university researchers, and young trainees, applauded with enthusiasm that reflected not just admiration for the business success, but inspiration from the human values that had guided the entire journey. After the official ceremony, an informal reception allowed people of all ages and backgrounds to share stories about how the network of technical centers had impacted their lives. Small farmers told of equipment saved from obsolescence. Young people reported professional opportunities discovered. Researchers described knowledge preserved. One of the most emotional moments of the reception was when Charles Anthony, grandson of Anthony Mitchell, the small farmer Rachel had helped free of charge years earlier, announced he had been accepted into the organization's scholarship program to study agricultural engineering. It was the living demonstration of how acts of generosity create positive cycles that perpetuate through generations. During the reception, Victoria had a private conversation with an international journalist who was documenting innovative models of sustainable agriculture. The question about what had been the most important moment of the entire journey made her reflect deeply before answering. The most important moment wasn't when we discovered the solution to the technical problems, nor when we received the first award, nor when we inaugurated the first external unit. It was when I managed to swallow my pride and admit I had made a terrible mistake with a person who deserved respect. The answer surprised the journalist, who had expected a response focused on business or technical aspects, but for Victoria, personal growth had been as important as professional success. Learning to trust again after years of paranoia had been an achievement more valuable than any financial profit. Rachel, in a separate interview, was asked about the greatest challenges faced during the organization's development. Her response reflected a different but complementary perspective to Victoria's. The greatest challenge was learning to balance preserving traditions with the need for innovation. "My dad taught me wonderful techniques, but I needed to adapt them to solve modern problems. Finding that balance required much experimentation and especially much dialogue with Mrs. Victoria." The interviews were published in specialized magazines and translated into several languages, spreading internationally the story of how two American women had created a revolutionary model of sustainable agriculture based on partnership, mutual respect, and social responsibility. In the week following the 100th unit ceremony, Victoria received an unexpected phone call that added another dimension to the story that seemed to have already reached its peak. It was from an American documentary filmmaker interested in producing a film about her partnership with Rachel for international distribution. The cinematic project represented an opportunity to share their story with a global audience, potentially inspiring other entrepreneurs to develop similar models of socially responsible business. After discussions with Rachel, they decided to support the project, provided that a percentage of the profits would be allocated to expanding the free training programs. The documentary production lasted 6 months, with filming in various network units and interviews with dozens of people impacted by their work. The director was particularly impressed by the authenticity of the relationships built over the years, something rare in the contemporary business world. The film premiered simultaneously in the United States and Brazil, receiving extremely positive reviews and several awards at international film festivals. Most importantly, however, was the inspirational impact it had on entrepreneurs from various countries, leading to the development of similar projects in different cultural and economic contexts. Invitations for international lectures began arriving with increasing frequency. Victoria and Rachel started traveling regularly to share their experiences at universities, business conferences, and sustainability events. Each presentation was an opportunity to inspire new business models based on human values. During a lecture at Stanford University, Victoria was asked what advice she would give to business owners facing trust crises in their organizations. Her response summarized decades of learning about leadership and human relationships. The first step is to take responsibility for your own mistakes, without trying to justify them or blame others. The second is to invest genuine time to understand perspectives different from our own. The third is to have the courage to make real changes, not just cosmetic ones. But the most important thing is to understand that building trust is a long process that requires consistency and patience. The leadership philosophy developed by Victoria, through her experience with Rachel, became a reference in business administration and executive coaching courses. Executives from major corporations regularly visited Meadowbrook Ranch to observe in practice how humanized management theories could be successfully implemented. Rachel also developed her own pedagogical approach, focused on teaching agricultural techniques through emotional connection with the land and equipment. Her training methods were documented and adapted for different rural contexts, influencing educational programs in dozens of countries. The Institute became a research center recognized by the UN as an example of sustainable development. Researchers from various continents regularly visited the facilities to study how traditional knowledge could be preserved and adapted to address contemporary agricultural challenges. At 80 years old, Victoria remained active as a strategic consultant for the organization, but had found a new passion: mentoring young female entrepreneurs facing challenges similar to those she had overcome decades earlier. Her home became a meeting point for discussions about women's leadership and social entrepreneurship. One of her most promising mentees was Isabella Sanders, a young engineer who was developing a project to revitalize abandoned mining equipment in rural communities. The similarity to her own story with Rachel didn't go unnoticed by Victoria. "Isabella, you remind me so much of myself when I started working with Rachel. You both have the same determination, the same passion for preserving knowledge, and the same social sensitivity." The comparison moved Isabella, who had grown up hearing stories about the legendary partnership between Victoria and Rachel. Being mentored by one of the country's most respected businesswomen was a privilege she took very seriously. "Mrs. Victoria, my greatest dream is to create something as meaningful as what you created, but sometimes I feel lost about where to start." The young woman's question made Victoria recall her own moments of uncertainty and fear during the years of building her partnership with Rachel. The wisdom accumulated over decades of business and personal experience now allowed her to offer valuable guidance to the next generation. "Isabella, the secret isn't having all the answers from the beginning. It's having the courage to make the first attempt, the humility to learn from mistakes, and the persistence not to give up when things get difficult. Most importantly, it's about finding the right people to walk beside you." The council perfectly reflected the journey that Victoria had traveled with Rachel. They hadn't started with a perfect plan or complete knowledge about what they were building. They had started with goodwill, hard work, and a willingness to learn together. The influence of Victoria and Rachel on the next generation of sustainable entrepreneurs continued to grow through mentoring programs, scholarships, and partnerships with universities. They had created a virtuous cycle where knowledge and values were passed on organically to people committed to positive social transformation. One summer afternoon, 30 years after the initial episode that nearly separated them forever, Victoria and Rachel met again in the office museum for a conversation without a specific agenda. They were just two friends and partners reflecting on a shared life of extraordinary achievements. The office now housed an impressive collection of awards, certificates, photographs, and objects that told the story of 3 decades of successful partnership. But what most impressed visitors was the simplicity and authenticity of the two women who had created it all. "Rachel, have you ever stopped to think about how different our lives would be if I hadn't exploded that morning?" asked Victoria with a smile that mixed amusement and genuine curiosity. "Sometimes I think about that, Mrs. Victoria. Perhaps we would have had a normal, respectful, professional relationship, but without this depth. Maybe I would never have fully developed my potential. Paradoxically, that terrible moment might have been necessary for us to become who we are today." Rachel's reflection touched something deep in Victoria's understanding of how life sometimes uses seemingly cruel methods to create opportunities for extraordinary growth. If everything had happened smoothly and predictably, perhaps they would never have developed the intensity of partnership, that characterized their relationship. It's ironic how sometimes we need to almost lose something to truly understand its value, observed Victoria. I almost lost you before even discovering who you really were. But that mistake forced me to confront my own flaws and limitations. The ability to transform crisis into growth had become one of the distinctive marks of their partnership. Over 3 decades, they had faced various economic, technical, and personal challenges, always emerging stronger and more united. The trust built after the initial crisis had become the solid foundation for overcoming any obstacle. In the final part of the conversation, they discussed plans for the organization's future and their own legacy. Rachel, at 62, still demonstrated the energy and vision to lead new projects. Victoria, at 85, maintained the clarity and wisdom that made her a valuable advisor. The most ambitious project in development was the creation of a rural university that would combine traditional technical teaching with advanced scientific research. The goal was to train a new generation of professionals capable of facing the challenges of agriculture in the 21st century without losing connection with knowledge tested by centuries of experience. The university would be built at Meadowbrook Ranch, transforming the property into an educational campus that would preserve its history while embracing the future. Students from various parts of the world could learn sustainable farming techniques in an environment that combined family tradition with technological innovation. The project represented the natural evolution of work, begun decades earlier, with repairs of broken tractors. From the urgent need to save a harvest had been born an international organization dedicated to knowledge preservation and sustainable development. From the initial conflict between 2 women had emerged a partnership that transformed lives and inspired generations. As the sun began to set over the fields of Meadowbrook Ranch on that summer afternoon, Victoria and Rachel stepped out of the office museum for another walk along the paths they had traveled together for so many years. The familiar landscape carried memories of challenges overcome, victories shared, and dreams realized beyond their most ambitious expectations. The gentle evening breeze carried scents of fertile soil and growing plants, reminding them that farming was fundamentally about constant renewal. Just as the seasons followed predictable, yet always unique cycles, their partnership had gone through different phases, each bringing new lessons and opportunities for growth. "Mrs. Victoria," said Rachel while watching the movement of modern equipment working in harmony with restored machinery, "sometimes I feel as if we're living in a dream. Everything we've managed to build seems too big to be real." Rachel, that feeling proves we've never lost the ability to be amazed by life's possibilities. The day it stops feeling like a dream will be the day we've lost the magic that made all this possible. Victoria's observation perfectly captured the spirit that had fueled their partnership over 3 decades. They had maintained the ability to dream big, work hard, and celebrate achievements without ever losing sight of the human values that gave meaning to all their efforts. As they walked back to the main house of the ranch, where a family dinner awaited them with children, grandchildren, and employees who had become extensions of the family, Victoria reflected on the most precious legacy they would leave: the practical demonstration that true partnership can overcome any obstacle and create something far greater than the sum of its individual parts. The story that had begun with an explosive misunderstanding had become living proof that forgiveness, teamwork, and shared values can generate extraordinary transformations. 2 women who had nearly become enemies had become a worldwide example of how to build bridges where walls once stood. The dinner table was filled not only with food prepared using ingredients from the ranch itself, but also with conversations about future plans, shared memories, and laughter that echoed through the house like familiar music. It was the kind of moment that gave meaning to all the struggles and achievements that had preceded it. Mary Elizabeth announced during dinner that she had been accepted into a doctoral program on sustainable agriculture, continuing the family tradition of innovation and knowledge. Her research would focus on techniques for preserving antique equipment using nanotechnology, perfectly representing the fusion between tradition and modernity that characterized the work developed by her mother and adoptive grandmother. Victoria heard the announcement with deep pride, knowing the family's fourth generation was prepared to carry forward the values and knowledge that had been cultivated over decades. The cycle of wisdom transmission would continue, adapting to future needs while maintaining its solid roots. The evening extended with conversations about technology, sustainability, social responsibility, and the challenges the next generation would face. Each person at the table contributed different perspectives, creating a rich dialogue that reflected the diversity of experiences and knowledge the organization had gathered. When they finally retired to rest, Victoria and Rachel exchanged a hug that summarized 3 decades of partnership, friendship, and shared achievements. It was the kind of hug only people who've weathered storms and celebrations, failures and victories, fears and hopes together can share. In her quarters, Victoria wrote in her diary a reflection about the day. Today marks 30 years since that morning that nearly tore us apart forever. Looking back, I see that every challenge faced, every tear shed, every victory celebrated brought us to this moment. Rachel isn't just my business partner. She's the sister I chose, the daughter I adopted, the friend I built through respect and shared work. Across the property in the house she'd shared with her family, Rachel also reflected on the day's meaning. In a letter she wrote but never sent, symbolically addressed to the father who'd left so many years ago, she expressed her gratitude. Dad, today I celebrate not just the success of our organization, but especially the beauty of a friendship born from adversity. Mrs. Victoria taught me that true leadership lies in lifting others up, not controlling them. I hope to honor your memory and the values you taught me. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Victoria made the right decision in seeking Rachel out to ask for forgiveness? We'd love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.